Hey there, ready to tackle a really interesting concept?
I'm game.
Today's deep dive is all about something we hear a lot about, but maybe haven't fully explored, and that's the idea of ego as an enemy.
Okay, I like it.
We're diving into Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy, and trust me, this book flips the script on typical success advice.
Oh,
We're
so
so used to hearing, believe in yourself, dream big. But what Holiday does so brilliantly is show us how unchecked ego can trip us up at every stage of the game.
it's true. And one of the things that makes this book so compelling is how Holiday uses these captivating, almost cautionary tales about high-profile figures to demonstrate how ego can lead to some pretty spectacular downfalls, even for people who seem to have it all.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not just CEOs and superstars either. Holiday's point, and this really resonated with me, is that ego doesn't just show up when you're on top.
Yeah.
It impacts us when we're just starting out, when we're riding a wave of success, and even when we're dealing with setbacks.
And that's what makes it so insidious. You think you have a handle on it, but ego wears a different mask at each stage.
Oh, interesting.
Think about it. When you're just starting out, it's that voice whispering, you're special, you deserve a shortcut. But then when you achieve a certain level of success, that's when ego can really take hold.
Totally. It's like,
Yeah.
see, I knew I was destined for greatness,
Mhm.
and suddenly you're not as open to learning or feedback anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of Holiday's most insightful points, in my opinion, is that true confidence is something you earn. It's not self-proclaimed. Ego, on the other hand, tends to blur the lines between the byproduct of success and the actual cause of it.
Okay.
It wants us to believe our own hype instead of putting in the real work.
He tells this story that's both relatable and kind of a wake-up call about his own experience with mentors he had put on a pedestal.
Oh, wow.
These were people he deeply admired, role models even.
Right.
And then, one by one, they had these very public downfalls, and at the core of each one,
Yeah.
you have ego-driven choices.
Wow.
It made him rethink his whole definition of success.
What's so powerful about those stories is that they remind us that even those who appear untouchable can be completely undone by ego. And that's a crucial message for all of us, no matter where we are on our own journeys.
Speaking of journeys, the book is structured around three key stages: aspire, success, and failure. And in each part, Holiday dives into how ego operates a little differently.
Okay.
So let's start with aspire, that beginning stage. Have you ever felt that impatience when you're first starting out, like, I deserve recognition now?
Absolutely. And it's understandable. It's easy to get caught up in that, especially in today's fast-paced world. But Holiday contrasts this with a more strategic and ultimately more effective approach.
He tells this fascinating anecdote about Marshall, a Roman poet.
Okay.
This guy was incredibly talented, but he was also incredibly bitter. He just couldn't stand the apprenticeship system, thought it was beneath him.
He craved the recognition and wealth of his patrons, but completely missed the opportunity right in front of him because of his attitude.
It's like he was so busy complaining about having to play the game that he never learned how to actually win. And that's where Holiday introduces this idea of the canvas strategy.
Right, and the canvas strategy is fascinating. Instead of demanding the spotlight, you focus on making your boss, your mentor, your company look good. You use your efforts to contribute to their success. Holiday uses the example of Bill Belichick, the mastermind behind the New England Patriots.
Okay, so we're not talking about a glamorous start, right? Analyzing game film for hours on end.
Exactly.
But Belichick saw it as a chance to master the fundamentals.
He wasn't focused on taking credit, he just wanted to contribute. And that, my friend, is how you build a foundation for long-term success.
And that's the thing. Sometimes it's the less glamorous work that teaches us the most. Speaking of which, the book also dives into a topic that's so relevant today, the dangers of excessive self-promotion.
It's almost like this age-old problem has been amplified in the age of social media, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
We're bombarded with messages telling us to build our personal brand, to be everywhere all the time, but that constant need for external validation can become a trap.
Totally. And Holiday actually shares a personal anecdote about this that really hit home for me. He was working on his first novel, and he got so caught up in the social media whirlwind, blogging, tweeting, all these things that felt like work, but were ultimately just feeding his ego and keeping him from finishing the book.
It's such a common trap, especially when we're striving for recognition and trying to make our mark.
Right.
But true progress often happens in those quiet moments of focused work, not in the echo chamber of social media.
I love how he talks about the power of silence, of strategically withholding information instead of feeling like we have to broadcast every thought and idea,
Right.
you know?
He uses some really compelling examples to illustrate this. Take William Tecumseh Sherman, the Civil War general. Brilliant strategist, but famously tight-lipped. He rarely gave interviews, avoided the spotlight.
He wasn't just being modest, was he? There was a strategy there.
Absolutely. Sherman understood that in a world of constant noise and chatter, silence is powerful. He didn't need to brag or boast. His actions spoke for themselves.
I like it.
Okay. Another example he gives is Bo Jackson, incredible athlete, excelled at both baseball and football. Jackson had big goals, but he didn't go around shouting about them. He understood that talking about your ambitions can sometimes diffuse the energy you need to actually achieve them.
So
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder to ask ourselves, am I spending more time talking about what I'm going to do, or am I actually doing it?
I love that.
Right. Action speaks louder than words. Now, shifting gears a bit, Holiday also explores this fascinating distinction between passion and purpose.
Okay. Yeah.
We hear so much about following our passion, but Holiday makes the point that blind passion without direction or discipline can actually be a recipe for disaster.
It's true.
It's more about having a purpose, a clear understanding of what you want to achieve, and the willingness to put in the sustained effort to get there, right?
Exactly.
Okay? He compares the approaches of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Eleanor Roosevelt, two very different figures, but both incredibly accomplished. Abdul-Jabbar, with his quiet intensity and relentless work ethic, he wasn't driven by fleeting excitement, but by a deep commitment to mastering his craft.
And Eleanor Roosevelt, this powerhouse of the 20th century, her dedication to social justice and human rights was unwavering. It wasn't some vague idea of changing the world, but a deep understanding of the issues and the grit to make a real difference.
And I think that's something that resonates with a lot of people. Think about those projects you started with a burst of enthusiasm, only to find that the initial excitement fades and the work becomes tedious.
So true.
It's purpose that helps you push through those challenging moments.
And that's where ego can really trip us up, right?
It wants that instant gratification, that quick hit of excitement. But true fulfillment comes from the satisfaction of seeing something through, of making a real contribution.
Absolutely. Now, let's move into the second part of the book, success. This is where things get even trickier because, as Holiday points out, ego can be even more dangerous after you've achieved a certain level of success.
Because the stakes are higher, the temptations are greater, and the fall from grace can be that much harder.
Right. And he uses the story of Howard Hughes as a cautionary tale. Here's this brilliant guy, aviator, filmmaker, entrepreneur who achieved incredible fame and fortune. But his wealth and talent were ultimately squandered by ego-driven decisions.
It's like he went from being this daring innovator to a recluse, eventually dying alone in a hotel room.
Hughes' story is a classic example of how success, without the right mindset and safeguards, can become a liability.
So what's the key takeaway here?
Well,
Success is not a destination, it's a journey. And the way we handle that journey, the choices we make, the values we prioritize, those are the things that ultimately determine whether success elevates us or destroys us.
and one of the things Holiday emphasizes in this section is the importance of remaining a student, even, and maybe especially, at the pinnacle of success.
It's easy to fall into that trap of thinking, I've made it, I have all the answers, but that's a recipe for stagnation, isn't it?
Exactly. And he contrasts Hughes with a historical figure you might not expect, Genghis Khan. Now, we tend to think of Khan as this ruthless conqueror, but Holiday highlights another aspect of his character, his insatiable curiosity and his eagerness to learn from others.
You're saying Genghis Khan was a lifelong learner.
Right.
That's not the image that usually comes to mind.
It's fascinating. Khan was constantly absorbing knowledge and technologies from the cultures he encountered, adapting his strategies and incorporating new ideas. He understood that the moment you stop learning is the moment you start falling behind.
So how can we apply that in our own lives?
Holiday encourages us to seek out situations where we can learn and grow, even if it means being the least knowledgeable person in the room. It's a challenge to our ego, for sure, but it's also incredibly liberating.
It's like choosing growth over comfort. And on that note, he also emphasizes the importance of mentors and teachers. Even when we've achieved a high level of success, it takes humility to admit you still have things to learn no matter how far you've come. And speaking of humility, that's a good segue into the final part of the book, failure. This is where things get really interesting because, as Holiday reminds us, failure is an unavoidable part of life, even for the most successful people out there.
And it's interesting how Holiday reframes failure.
Yeah.
He doesn't see it as something to be feared, but as an opportunity for growth. It's often in those moments when we stumble that we discover just how resilient we really are.
He tells this incredibly powerful story about Katharine Graham inheriting the Washington Post.
Hmm.
Talk about being thrown into the deep end. She was dealing with personal tragedy, professional turmoil. It was a perfect storm of challenges.
Imagine stepping into that situation, her husband's suicide, a hostile takeover attempt, a major union strike, all while trying to lead a major newspaper during one of the most turbulent times in American history.
It's hard to fathom facing even one of those challenges, let alone all of them at once. But Graham persevered, and she did it with courage, with humility, and with this unwavering commitment to a purpose that was bigger than herself.
It's a testament to the power of choosing how we respond to those inevitable setbacks. Ego wants us to make excuses, to shift the blame, but Graham's story shows us the power of confronting failure head on, learning from those mistakes, and using those experiences to propel ourselves forward.
It's about asking, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? Instead of letting it completely derail us.
Exactly. And in this section, Holiday introduces a concept I find incredibly helpful: the indifferent spectator.
Okay, I'll admit that sounds a bit, well, indifferent. What does he mean by that?
It's about cultivating this inner observer, almost like a detached but wise advisor who can look at our actions objectively, judging them against a higher standard, not just what we can get away with or what will impress others.
So it's about developing that internal compass that guides us towards integrity and excellence, regardless of what's happening around us.
You got it. He shares a really interesting anecdote about Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. So, picture this. They've just won the Super Bowl. Everyone's ecstatic. But instead of getting caught up in the euphoria of the victory, the coaching staff immediately focuses on what? Analyzing their own near miss in drafting Brady.
Wait, they almost missed drafting Tom Brady. That's a Super Bowl winning quarterback we're talking about.
I know, right? But here's the thing. They recognized they'd gotten lucky, and they were determined to learn from it, to refine their scouting process so they wouldn't make the same mistake twice.
That's incredible. Even in the midst of a major triumph, they were able to stay grounded, stay focused on continuous improvement. It's a powerful reminder to always be learning, always be seeking ways to up our game, even when we're at the top of our game.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And it all circles back to this core idea: ego is the enemy. It's about recognizing that ego can sabotage us in all areas of life. It thrives on external validation, on that need to be right, to be seen as the best.
And what Holiday encourages us to do is to cultivate a different kind of mindset,
Yeah.
one that's grounded in humility, purpose, and a willingness to constantly learn and grow, even from our failures. It's about defining success on our own terms, not by society's metrics, but by living a life of meaning, integrity, and purpose.
And maybe, just maybe, as Holiday suggests, the most successful life isn't about amassing the most, but about needing the least. Something to ponder, right?
Absolutely. This deep dive has given us a lot to think about. If you're intrigued by these ideas, and I have a feeling you are, I highly recommend checking out Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. It's a game changer.